Greetings from Wyoming. OSY guy here, and this was going to be my review of Ubuntu 18.04, but I tried out Pop OS about 2 months ago as Pop OS 17.10, and wow, it's too good. So here's my review of Pop OS 18.04. Let's take a look at Ubuntu 18.04. Up here I've got a virtual box running with 18.04 installed. This is the default Ubuntu experience of Gnome, and so you have the panel across the top, and you also have the Ubuntu dock on the left side, which is something they decided to add in back when Unity was their desktop environment. They had something that looks somewhat similar to this. It was called the Unity Launcher, and it's basically the dock of those years. So they decided to imitate that dock with the Ubuntu dock in 18.04 as well. Now, this is a locked down experience, in my opinion, of GNOME. There are a few things that I like to make changes to, and I can't really do it within their locked down version. So let me just slide over to my version of Pop OS running on this computer. Now, this is more of a traditional GNOME experience in that you see my desktop background and you see the panel, and that's all you see. So there is no dock showing, although with the traditional GNOME experience, if you are informed of the super key, which is the key at the bottom left portion of your keyboard, that for most of us, that is the key that has the Windows logo on it. That super key, if pressed, will take you to an alternate view that they call the Activities Overview. And when we go to the Activities view, we end up seeing this hidden dock. And so at this point, if we decided, for instance, to open up Firefox, and I click on Firefox, and my Activities view disappears, and I go back over into the working normal view, and that's how it works. And I really like the hidden dock there. It doesn't ever show up unless I call for it by pressing the super key. Alternately, you can also just click on the word Activities at the top left-hand corner. That does the same thing. Now, if you look through this list and you say, well, I would like to run something that's not on the list, then one way that you can find the rest of the programs would be to click on the Show Applications icon at the bottom. And so this starts to show you the rest of the applications that are available. Now, the terminal is not listed over here in the favorites list, and so if I want to make that a part of the favorites list, I can right-click on it and select Add to Favorites. If there is an icon over in the favorites list here that you don't want, I can just right-click and select Remove from Favorites as well. So the thing that I want you to notice is how clean this experience is. When we're in the Activities view, by clicking on the super key, I dare you to have this clean of an experience by pressing the super key in front of a computer running Windows 10, where you get attacked with 22 tiles that are almost completely unusable. I have several customers who are running Windows 10 who never even use that list of tiles that shows up. It's just a very cluttered experience, and I really like this experience where when I go back over to my normal view, I have a clean working screen. I really like that option, and so let me talk about how I would change that if I wanted to continue to use Ubuntu. there are a couple of terminal commands that I run in the case of using Ubuntu. I will do sudo apt install gnome session and sudo apt install vanilla gnome desktop. When I do those two and then reboot the Ubuntu computer, that changes the computer so that it has more than the option for an Ubuntu session. It will then also have a GNOME session. Here's what I mean. If we reboot the computer and get to the logon screen and then click on the cog icon here, you will see that, well, before installing the GNOME session, you would have Ubuntu and Ubuntu on Wayland. Ubuntu is actually Ubuntu on Xorg, which is the older display system. The newer display system is Wayland. If you're a new user, I would stick with the X version. That one's a little bit more reliable still. But now, in addition to Ubuntu and Ubuntu on Wayland, now you have GNOME and GNOME on Xorg. So the GNOME up here is GNOME on Wayland. If at this point you choose GNOME on Xorg and then log in, you will end up with a more flexible experience. You'll be able to make more changes and have more options available to you than you do under the lockdown Ubuntu session experience. Now, we talk about Pop OS here. System 76 is a terrific hardware manufacturer. They are just 100 miles south of me. I live in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and System 76 is located in Denver, Colorado. I'm certainly planning to visit them sometime in the future because they are awesome. But in addition to making computers that are optimized for Linux, they also decided to give their customers an optimized experience by developing their own in-house version of Ubuntu, which is Pop OS. Now, their idea behind this was that they wanted to zero in on professionals who are in computer science, and they wanted to give the best computing tools to an operating system for those who are creators. Well, I can't put myself into the creator category, or I'm not sure if I can put myself into the computer science area either. I am a computer technician, and I'll tell you, Pop OS presses a lot of my buttons, and they just do a marvelous job. Just to show you, we'll go to the desktop section of System 76. One of my favorite computers. I have a 2015 version of this Meerkat, but we'll just take a look at that very quickly. If I click on that and we say design and buy, you'll see that they provide this with one of two operating systems, Pop OS 1804 or Ubuntu 1804. So they provide their kind of a specialized tweaked version of Ubuntu, and it's just really good. So I just want to talk a little bit more about that. This Pop OS has been developed by folks at System 76, and they brought in a man by the name of Cassidy James Blade. I want to give a shout out to him because he is the user experience designer, UX for short, for Pop OS. He was originally the user experience designer for Elementary OS, and Elementary OS has made a big impression in the Linux community as well. It's a very elegantly designed operating system, and so I think he's had a strong influence on getting things to go in a really good direction. Pop OS 1804, for all intents and purposes, it is Ubuntu 1804. It just has a different face, different defaults, but all the Ubuntu software repositories are available for both Pop OS and Ubuntu. No difference there. Both operating systems use the version of GNOME 3.28. They both use Linux kernel 4.15. And so, but the Pop OS has done some changes. Let me just mention a few of the changes that these are kind of small changes, and yet it's nice to not have to go in and tweak these changes. As an example, up at the top of the screen, the time is displayed up here at the calendar section, and that is displayed without my changing it in 12-hour format, so AM/PM format. The default for Ubuntu and the default for GNOME itself is to be displaying this as a 24-hour clock, and so I would always have to go in and tweak that and change it. They also would not be showing the date by default up here, but Pop OS automatically turns on the date for you as well. There are some keyboard shortcuts that have been refocused by Pop OS, and so for instance, if we want to open up a terminal, we just press the super key and the letter T for terminal, and that opens up the terminal. To show you some of the other keyboard shortcuts, let's open up settings. So I'll press the super key to switch over to activities, and then I'll just type in settings, and there it is. I'll press the enter key. That opens up the settings app, and we'll tile this over to the right, and we'll take a look at devices, and we'll go to keyboard. This is the section where Pop OS has gone through and changed a lot of the defaults that are in here, so that the keyboard shortcuts are more memorable and more useful. One of the keyboard shortcuts that they promised to make, and then they ended up not doing it, was the shortcut key for your files manager. The Nautilus program is called Files in GNOME, and they promised in their literature that there would be a shortcut for getting to Nautilus, which would be the Super F combination, and then if you pop into the keyboard section, you'll find that that's not the case. It just shows like this. So I do like having Super F as the shortcut for my file manager. So I just click on this and hold down the super key and press the letter F and then say set. And now if I press Super F, I get my file manager without any problem whatsoever. I also do add for my default web browser, my default choice for a web browser is Chromium, and so I put in for the web browser here Super 1, and then that automatically opens up my Chromium web browser, and there are all kinds of other shortcuts that are already changed by Pop OS. But they can also be changed and added to as you so desire just by going to the keyboard section of settings. Now let me open up the tweak. This is Gnome Tweaks, and this is not installed in Pop OS or in Ubuntu by default. You can open up your software center to put that in place. We'll just tile this over to the right again so we can look at it. They give you the pop theme and pop icons and so on, and so I appreciate that. But there is one setting that I like to change inside of the Gnome Tweaks tool, and that is that they have a setting for the applications theme of just the word pop, like this. And if you'll watch carefully up here on the title bar, you'll see that it changes to darker gray, kind of dirty brown gray title bar. That I don't like that as well, so I do like to change that. So I'll switch it over to Pop Light, and that gives me this more pleasant gray panel instead. I like that change. I'm going to have you take a look at extensions. Now, I add 3 extensions in here. So I add Open Weather, which is this weather app up here that's always available to me by clicking it. And then I add the screenshot tool, and I add top panel workspace scroll. The rest of these are already in place, placed there by Pop OS. So I added nothing but the 3 that I just showed you there. Now they have one thing that they do, which I mentioned here on the Attach Modal Dialogs. It's in the Windows section. Pop OS has chosen to turn off Attach Modal Dialogs. Now it's kind of a cryptic sounding thing, so I'll show it to you here shortly, but this by default in other versions of GNOME, whether it's Ubuntu GNOME or Fedora GNOME, the Attach Modal Dialogs is turned on by default, and that's not the best choice as far as I'm concerned. I'll show you where it shows up the most commonly for me. I'll open up my file manager, and then I'll open up my simple scan tool and wait for it to come in here. There it is. Okay, I'm going to run the scan. After this runs, let's just assume for a moment that this was a scan of maybe a credit card receipt, and I'm about to title it with the where that credit card receipt is from, and the date of the receipt, and how much the amount was, and so on. So if I press the icon up here that says Save, then I would get the Save dialog. Now, if this Attach Modal Dialogs is turned on, then you can't move the Save dialog, which becomes less than helpful when I'm trying to look at the maybe the date on this receipt and so on. So the idea that I'm kind of stuck with not being able to move this dialog box around is a deal breaker for me. So in fact, I prefer to have this Modal Dialogs turned off, and it is by default in Pop OS. So thank you, Pop OS, for doing that. Now you've seen me using some keyboard shortcuts here already, but they've really refined their window and workspace management shortcuts. You will notice that the common denominator for all these shortcuts is the super key. So these were sometimes a little bit scatterbrained shortcuts. If you wanted to move to another workspace in Ubuntu or other GNOME distributions, it would always be Control Alt down arrow to move to the new workspace, and Control Alt up arrow to move to the previous one. But now it's just simply the super key. Super down takes me down to the next workspace, and super up moves me back to the original workspace. Then as far as getting some control over individual windows, you just simply add the control key to the super key for the rest of these. So let me open up the software center, which is called the Pop Shop inside of Pop OS. Now let's just say that we want to maximize this screen. Control Super up arrow maximizes. Control Super down arrow restores it. Control Super left arrow tiles it to the left, and Control Super right arrow does it to the right. There is a if you press Super H, that will hide the window or minimize the window, and then I'll bring it back like this. And then if I would like to close it, I just press Super W, which is the window closing command. All those are very memorable, very useful, and just a lot better idea. For instance, the the Super W that I just showed you, traditionally, for how long has this existed? Does this go back to maybe Windows 3.1? I don't know, but Alt F4 is not an intuitive command for closing a window. Their idea of doing Super W instead, it makes a lot more sense. And if I end up in some other version of GNOME, whether it's Fedora or Ubuntu or whatever, I'm probably going to pop into that keyboard section and revise and put in Super W there as well. I really like these keyboard shortcuts. They are well thought out. I just mentioned the Pop Shop. That's this was actually brought in. I think it was brought in by the user experience designer for Pop OS, Cassidy James Blade, I believe is his name again. But Elementary OS developed their software center as the Elementary App Center, and they basically ported over into Pop Shop for Pop OS, and boy, it sure is nice. There is a Debian Installer program that they always include in Pop OS. This happens in this way. If you go to download Google Chrome off of the web, it will come onto your computer as a Google Chrome stable.deb. If you double click on that will open up the Eddy installer, and it very faithfully installs programs that are Debian files, and so it does a great job. There is a USB bootable flash drive installer called Popsicle that is quite good. There's been some problems in the past with the Ubuntu startup disk creator. I've had trouble with it, where it would not install ISO files like for Fedora, which is not a Debian based Linux operating system. It's a RPM based, and the Ubuntu startup disk creator just couldn't handle that one. But I did just to make sure. I went and grabbed Fedora 28 and installed it onto a flash drive with Popsicle, and it went on flawlessly. It was great. When you first start your install process for Pop OS, it's almost the first screen that shows up offers to encrypt your entire hard drive, and I personally choose not to do that, but certainly if you're concerned about security, and I'm sure many of you are, the idea of encrypting your entire hard drive so that if somebody steals your computer, your information is safe, that certainly is an option worth considering. When you install, at this point, if you pull the installer off of the Pop OS website and install a fresh install, you will find that you have an option when you start up your computer after everything's in place. If you press the escape key, you will see that the boot menu options that show up will include Pop OS recovery. It's an interesting one. I haven't had the opportunity to do this because Pop OS has been so reliable. I haven't even had to think about it. But if you choose Pop OS recovery from this boot menu, you will install Pop OS from scratch without even having to have your USB installer disk. So that's really cool there too. Search everything is something that they promise, and it certainly is the case. When we go over into activities overview, if I type in Ubuntu Notes, this found my document that is inside of my Dropbox folder, and so the activities view allows you to search for everything, as they say. So you can look for files that are stored on your computer. You can look for the programs that are already installed. And you can also look for programs that are not installed yet and have it find those programs from inside the Pop shop. So just some very nice benefits with using Pop OS. Bottom line, I have had no crashes with Pop OS. I have it installed on 2 desktops, 2 laptops. Wow, what a nice experience. All I can say is if you're looking for a really premium experience of GNOME, then Ubuntu 18.04 is great, but Pop OS is better. Hats off to those guys. Thanks a lot, System76. Thanks for watching. I've got some future videos in the pipeline. I want to talk about Robocopy for Windows. I'm going to put out another one for my favorite remote desktop application is now Simple Help, and I'm planning on doing some various LibreOffice videos in the future as well. Thanks for watching, and let me just leave you with a wonderful scene from the Tetons in Wyoming. Bye-bye.